Now, this is me getting on my cybersecurity soapbox 100%. But as you think about vulnerability management and the true definition of a software supply chain, very, very often it's not necessarily your first party software that you have to be concerned about. It's your third party software that you have to be concerned about, right? In the case of SolarWinds, that's exactly what happened there. And so imagine being able to preemptively have a single pane of glass of all vulnerabilities throughout your entire organization. And that is our goal with SBOM import. And so I do want to emphasize that very rarely would you want to import a first-party SBOM, because then in an ideal world, you would just be analyzing that with FOSSA anyway, which is going to give you a more accurate detection. It's primarily in the case of consuming SBOMs from software producers that you are vetting or are currently using, and you want to make sure that you can always understand what that risk posture is. And I'll show you how that plays into a larger strategy here in a second. So if you think about kind of going back to those import methods I showed you earlier, CLI, quick import, we talked about that. And then now we can talk about SBOM import. Today, we only support CycloneDX, and that is primarily because CycloneDX requires a Perl, a package URL, and that is critical for us to be able to identify these particular SBOMs, packages, and then relate them to the open source version, open it, do a license compliance and vulnerability information against it. That aside, we can go ahead and onboard our particular or import our particular SBOM. These are some examples that I've actually just gotten straight from CycloneDX for demo purposes. And in this particular case, we're doing Keycloak. I'm going to name this Keycloak webinar demo. Okay. The reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to add it to an existing project rather than add a new project. And so you can think about this as a new version of this particular project that I'm new submitting. And so for producer, Keycloak in this case has already given me an SBOM. They go from version 1.0 to now version 1.3. I want to make sure that I can actually have that one-to-one mapping as well. And that maintains that historical reference within FOSSA also. And so we'll go ahead and import that particular SBOM. We'll include it, we'll add it to our SBOM team, and then you can see how that then appears in our UI afterwards. And so in this case, this is all of my projects, right? I can quickly filter down to ones that are coming from an SBOM import. And in this case, it's our Keycloak webinar demo. And I'll start to show you some of the additional versions. And so this is the one that I've just recently submitted. This is now being scanned and analyzed for dependencies, figuring out which packages are in there, downloading them all, analyzing those for licenses, and then comparing vulnerabilities against that as well. And so while all that's happening in the background, we'll talk about the version I already have submitted. And the power of importing SBOMs, this then plays directly into all the other issue remediation that we've already talked about. And so now I can quickly see what license issues are surfacing because of this particular SBOM and what vulnerabilities are surfacing, and then any additional risk information such as outdated packages and abandonware, so on and so forth. And so in this particular case, I can hop in, we can kind of check out some vulnerabilities associated with it. I can even group these by version. This will be set as the default state here in a week. I'm kind of just giving you some early insight, but I can quickly now see, okay, well, these are the packages that have the most issues associated with them. And if I filter down to a direct perspective, kind of going back to that prioritization that we talked about earlier, this is how I would prioritize being put in your shoes. And this is now my beginning list that I would go after to start removing these vulnerabilities. And so very quickly, what appeared like 248 vulnerabilities is actually, 10, 15 or so vulnerabilities, right? Yeah, 15, good math. And so that is key number one to why managing or importing SBOMs is so powerful. The second aspect of that is you can then start to look across your entire organization for risk as well. And so we do that in the form of two different views. That first view is going to be your global view. And so from a vulnerability perspective, this is now looking across all projects that I have in my entire organization. Of course, this respects RBAC. And so if you only have certain teams and so on and so forth, it's only going to show you projects that you have access to. But knowing that you can have that single pane of glass across now all my first party vulnerabilities and third party vulnerabilities. And the exact same thing, of course, on the licensing side as well. But the last really powerful part is functionality that we have currently available actually for our Lighthouse customers and are extending here going into September and October is our packages view. And then you can then also manage packages across your entire environment as well. And so if I go back to Keycloak here for a second, I can see that most of these vulnerabilities in this particular case are coming from one package in this Tomcat Catalina package. And so maybe my question is, well, where else is that in my environment? And where else should I be concerned about that? And so being able to quickly look across all packages that I have, see which versions are being used, and know that in this case, they're being used in these 3 projects, which are all of the same SBOM that I've imported, and then what vulnerabilities are associated with this particular version. So it's that investigation looking across first party and third party that unlocks a ton of power. And that is why we highly encourage everyone to make sure that they are requesting these SBOMs from their software producers and then importing them on a per version basis to make sure that you have that one-to-one mapping.